Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I want to make a quick video going over what is the best leveling build for Sorcerer, one of the single best leveling builds in the entire game, and it somehow got even better with the Vessel of Hatred expansion. I've had early access, I've been playing for about the past week or so, been trying a whole bunch of crazy stuff, so feel free to subscribe and check out a lot of the other videos that I've made for Spiritborn and just general stuff, but also I've been leveling up a lot of the classes, and I wanted to mess around on Sorc. I've played this build a ton in the past. If you didn't know, Firewall Sorc has been one of the best leveling builds in the game for, I don't know, kind of since launch almost, and that has not only not really changed, it's gotten even better. So I just wanted to quickly go over what has changed, what are some new aspects you want to be looking out for, how you want to set up the skill tree, etc., so that you guys can absolutely blast on your Sorcerer. When it comes to what build is going to be good in the end game, not 100% sure right now. I do think you could probably carry this build into the end game without too much difficulty, but I'm not sure that it's going to scale up later on. At some point, you will probably want to swap into a more pure conjuration focused build, or you'd want to swap into Frozen Orb, I believe is probably going to be your best bet. Either Frozen Orb or some variation of Lightning Spear. Regardless, though, as you can see in the gameplay, this build is just insane. Damage is really good. Doesn't really need many legendary aspects to start out with. The survivability has always been very, very good on this build. And there's a new aspect that seems particularly broken, which we will talk about. Before I get into it, I want to quickly mention that I'm going to be streaming a ridiculous amount over on Twitch. So I would greatly appreciate it if you guys could come drop by and give me a follow or something like that. Come give me a nice little smooch. You get little Twitch drops if you come watch. You can come hang out, ask me questions, and just watch me play Spiritborn over and over and over again and make 5 million builds. There's also a pretty cool supporter streamer thing going on, so if you want to get this mount skin and this mount armor, you could just come by, give some subs. The support is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys. But anyways, as always, the build will be posted over on Mobalytics. Feel free to come by here, drop a favorite, helps me out a ton as well. But the benefit of checking out this, I would just slap this on another monitor just so you can look at the leveling path, to be honest with you. I literally do this while making my own video, and also I'll have all the legendary aspects, etc. And if anything actually gets changed from the version of the game that I'm playing to the new version, or if I decide, you know, certain skills are better than others or whatever, I will update it on the written version of the build. So definitely make sure to check that out. Alright, so when it comes to the actual build itself, if you guys haven't played it in a while, basically Firewall just does a whole bunch of damage. You put it down, it just does really good damage. But as of recently, Hydra got pretty significantly buffed, where Hydra itself does quite a lot of damage, and the brand new Familiar also does quite a lot of damage. So you kind of have three skills here that are all doing pretty good damage, and you use them for a little bit of different effect. If you need like Hydra plus Familiar, just spamming them is going to be really good for just clearing the map. It'll kind of just kill everything for you, but you'll lack a lot of single target damage, and these actually apply burning effects, and we're going to be scaling our burning effect with our key passive. So that's why we actually still take Firewall, is because a lot of the time, if you're fighting like higher health elites or bosses or something, just Familiar and Hydra, the pure raw damage from those isn't really going to be high enough to like melt a boss. So that's where Firewall comes in. You can slam that down and start doing a lot of damage with that as well. And you want to be scaling like your fire damage and your fire damage over time. All the other skills we're using are pretty much going to be supplemental. And let's just go over the skill tree real quick, just so you guys know how to spend your skill points and what is pretty good for you. So starting off, we're going to be playing with Firebolt as our basic skill. Your first few levels are going to be kind of aids until you get Hydra, Familiar, and Firewall. It's not going to be a good time because you're not going to have many skills. Early on, you could just slam a whole bunch of points into Fireball if you want, but that makes it difficult for me to path it out on the leveling website. So for the purposes of just following exactly how I had it on the website, we're going to go 1 point into Fireball here. Again, for the first couple of levels, you could just fully max that out. Then we'll go into Potent Warding, just 2 points, just to get us some resistances. And then we're going to go into Teleport, Enhanced Teleport, and Shimmering. I forgot to mention, we want Firebolt on our bar just because it counts as a Pyromancy skill, which matters for other reasons, and it also increases the burning damage that we do to an enemy by 25%. So when you're fighting bosses, you just slam this on them every 3 seconds, do a little bit of extra damage, might as well. Then we're going to go into Ice Armor, just 1 point, and then we'll go into Elemental Attunement, which has a chance to reset the cooldown of both our Teleport and our Ice Armor. Now we can actually play the game because we got access to Hydra and Familiar. So first I'm going to access Hydra, Enhance Hydra, and then Summoned. This makes it just do a lot of burning damage, which is particularly nice. And then we're going to unlock the Familiar. The Familiar is brand new, so I'll just quickly show how it works. Basically, based on whatever damage type you previously did before you activate it, it will then count as that damage type. So for example, if I cast Teleport, it will then use a Shock Familiar, but that's not what we want. No, I didn't even do that, whatever. If I cast Ice Armor, I'll use a Frost Familiar. That's not what we want, though. We want it to be the Fire Familiar pretty much all the time. Not only for one of our aspects, but also because the Fire Familiar is going to apply burning damage, and we're scaling our burning damage quite a lot, as well as our pyromancy damage in general. So the amount of damage that this thing does is pretty good, and we end up pairing this with the familiar enchant, where anytime you cast a non-familiar conjuration, you have a chance to spawn a familiar of that same element. So when you're just running around mobbing in like Helltide or something, you kind of just sit here and spam hydras out, and then you're going to be spawning a lot of those familiars as a result of spamming those hydras. It's just a like 1 in 4 chance. Once you have higher attack speed and you start spamming those more, you'll get more familiars to actually spawn. Spamming your Hydra button does come at the cost of actually pressing your Firewall button, and you will need to know when you want to press Firewall and when you will want to just be spamming Hydra. Generally, I would go out of your way to Firewall mobs that have a lot of HP because you will need the raw damage. Firewall's base damage is 230% weapon damage, which is really high, and that's nowhere like Hydra and Familiar are nowhere near that value. So if you're fighting a mob that's probably going to last like 5-6 seconds, you'll want to put some firewalls down. Otherwise, if you're just clearing through Helltide and killing a bunch of little crapper mobs, that's when you're going to want to be spamming Hydra and Familiar. Alternatively, you could use the Firewall enchant as well. And then for our other enchant, we're using Fireball. This is just insanely good for ad clear. Anytime you kill an enemy, Fireball just blows up, right, and just chain reactions everything, and that's really nice. 3 of our damage skills, and at this point you can kind of spend, like, you just have a million points to slap into passives, and you can kind of do it however you want. Right here I'm just going to go for some generic damage. So I get 3 points in the Glass Cannon, which is going to scale all 3 of our skills here, and then I'm going to go into Fiery Surge so that we have enough mana to actually be spamming our skills, and then I'll go into Warmth because this is just a ridiculous amount of survivability. While enemies are burning, you just get a lot of healing. So without this, your survivability feels a little weak. But with this, your survivability feels really, really nice. Then again, I just want to increase my damage with all of our skills. So I go 3 points into Inner Flames, which again, it's going to increase our pyromancy damage. So it buffs everything that we're using here. And then I'll go into Combustion, where we do 60% increased burning damage. Familiar's secondary effect is going to apply 40% burning damage. Hydra's base thing is also going to apply damage. And Firewall is going to be doing burning damage as well, so Combustion is just straight up our best bet. At some point with a pure Conjuration skill, you'd probably swap to Enlightenment and take Firewall off, but for the purposes of leveling, this is what we still want to do. At this point, we want to start buffing our skills. It's kind of up to you if you prefer the playstyle of like spamming Firewall versus spamming Hydras and which one you want to upgrade first. Personally, I think upgrading Hydra first is probably your best bet because early on, mobs don't have like a ton of HP. So I'm going to buff Hydra, and then around this level, you probably need some survivability, and you might have the conceited aspect, so grabbing protection is pretty nice for some survivability there. And then, what else did I do? I guess just max out our Familiar, so it does pretty good damage, and then we'll also max out our Firewall. So all of our skills we're going to be maxing out here. It's a little bit wasteful in terms of points, but you have a lot of skill points, so you kind of might as well. And if you're fighting bosses or like trying to do higher difficulty stuff, you're really going to need the damage from Firewall. But the clear speed benefit that you get from Hydra and Familiar being ranked up is also really good. So that's why I kind of like to have the mix there. And then 3 ranks into Conjuration Mastery is real nice. As we're spamming our Hydras and our Familiars, we're getting a pretty good amount of stacks with this, which gives us damage, movement speed, and even mana regen. I'll just grab some more survivability, so Mana Shield is quite nice, regularly getting a 30% damage reduction there. And then Evocation is nice for cooldown reduction for all of our spells, but namely giving our Familiar some cooldown reduction is pretty good there. And then I'll go into Elemental Synergies, which is just going to increase our damage. We have a lot of Pyromancy skills on the bar, so that will just increase our damage overall. Endless Pyre is quite a bit of extra damage. Probably could have spec'd this earlier on, but it's not that big of a deal. And then we could go into Enhanced Ice Armor and Shimmering Ice Armor for just more cooldown reduction. When it comes to using Ice Armor, like, I think this is pretty good defensively, but if you want to use something else like Ice Blades, Frost Nova, Flame Shield, like, it's really up to you. It's not that big of a deal. Personally, I just think Ice Armor is probably your best bet because it gives you quite a lot of barrier that lasts a pretty long time, and you can reduce its cooldown pretty significantly. Now we have another 5 points. I think I forgot to put 1 point somewhere. Oh, I quite like Align the Elements. This gives quite a lot of damage reduction against elites. And with our last point, just slam it into Teleport to rank that guy up so that it just has a lower cooldown. I'll quickly explain the gameplay again just for you guys that are curious. But while you're running around in Helltide, you want to just be spamming out Hydras. And then right after you cast Hydra, you want to use all 3 of your charges of Familiar. And if you're killing little crap mobs, you can just run around, boop, 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 put down a lot of Hydras. And then as you're spawning Hydras, that will spawn more Familiars. And then if you happen to run into like a big elite, you can put down a few Firewalls on him just to get that like raw like really high fire damage going on, and then you could throw like a firebolt every once in a while if it's a boss, and then you kind of just rotate between pressing Hydra and pressing Firewall if you need to for the additional damage there. And then otherwise, you just use your Ice Armor pretty much on cooldown or if you ever feel scared, and then your Teleport, obviously you just use for movement, and it does give you damage reduction as well. Make sure that you are always pressing your Familiar after pressing either Firewall, Firebolt, or Hydra, so that counts as fire, because if you press it after pressing Teleport, it'll be Shock, or if you use it after Ice Armor, it will be cold. As you can see right here. There you go. When it comes to legendary aspects, there's actually quite a lot that are pretty decent, and there's one that seems insanely broken, but I don't have access to it yet. For some reason, it just doesn't drop. This thing seems really, really good, where if you cast a Pyromancy skill, it'll conjure a little conjuration guy that is just a dagger that just does a lot of damage. I don't know if this tooltip value is accurate, but if it goes up to 5,000 damage, and then that damage increases by 100%, per skill that you cast while it's active, that is one of the most broken things I've seen. That is a extremely high value for a legendary. So if you happen to get this, definitely try it, and it will probably carry you while leveling. The drop rate on it seems really low. I leveled this character from 1 to 60, and I did not see a single one of these. So can't really speak too much on that, but that does seem to be particularly good. Another aspect that's just generically good is Conceited. I'd probably slam this on the amulet just while you have a barrier up. You do increase damage, and anytime you just use a cooldown, you'll get a barrier. So anytime you press your Familiar, you're going to have a barrier up as well as Ice Armor. So that's just a lot of extra damage for you. Another aspect that I would look out for is Engulfing Flames. This is just going to increase your damage over time, so it overall just ends up being a pretty decent damage increase. Edge Masters is an oldie but a goodie, always usually pretty decent, just 20% increased damage. I've been trying out this new aspect, Firestarter. The value on it does not seem to actually represent how much damage it does. It seems to do significantly less damage than this. If you get it, you can use it. It's like okay for a little bit of instant damage, but generally speaking, I wouldn't say it's very good. One that I quite like is actually Inevitable Fate. When an enemy falls below 35% health, while they have any damage over time effect, they will just explode and do just raw damage. And it seems to do significantly more damage than Firestarter. And if you have a whole bunch of mobs together, because and then they get really low HP, they'll all blow up, and then Fireball kind of cascades with that. So if you get this one, it's pretty good. I wouldn't go out of your way to imprint this like I would with Conceited or Edge Masters, but it is pretty decent. I would really just look out for that Elemental Dagger one, and I'll have all of it in the build planner as well, so you don't have to worry about it. Another one that is okay that you could look out for, I wouldn't really go out of your way to get this at all, but Accursed Touch, just applying vulnerable is like pretty decent for you, but it's really not all that good because it's not going to have very good uptime. Otherwise, look out for Talrasha. Talrasha is real nice. If you ever have mana problems, you really shouldn't have mana problems with this build, to be honest with you, unless you're literally just sitting there holding down right click. And even if you are, Fiery Surge gives you a ton of mana. But this aspect, Ring of Elemental Acuity, is really good. Casting a Pyromancy, Shock, or Frost skill increases your mana regen by 20% for 5 seconds. And then if you happen to use all 3 elements, it'll give you 120% mana regen. So I'll just demonstrate how good that is right now. So right now I'm just holding down right click, and you see my mana is going to go down. I can't just sit here and completely hold it. I could for a little bit, but then it'll go down, right? But if I just use a fire skill, shock skill, and a frost skill, you can see my mana is regenerating really, really quickly to the point of I don't even have enough attack speed to possibly spend all of this mana. Usually you're not going to be running around holding down Firewall. You're going to be pressing Hydra instead, because Hydra is going to be spawning those familiars. And when you're fighting bosses, you want to be rotating between pressing Firewall, Hydra, Familiar, etc. So mana shouldn't really be that big of a deal for you. But if it is, then I would definitely just use Elemental Acuity, and that'll pretty much solve it entirely for you. Otherwise, just go for some like raw damage aspects, and you'll be perfectly fine. Defensively, I would pretty much always grab Pants of Concentration, or not Pants, but Concentration, just 25% DR anytime you use a Conjuration skill, and then also Disobedience for your armor there is real nice. And then Ghostwalkers is okay. There's also one that gives you movement speed after you run through your Firewall. That's pretty good. When it comes to tempering your items, I would recommend pretty much going for straight up fire damage, because that's going to scale all of your damage. So fire damage is quite nice, and if it happens to roll on Pyromancy attack speed, that is pretty good too, especially if you get the Elemental Dagger legendary, because more attack speed means you can do more attacks while it's active. Mastery damage is okay, but keep in mind that will not scale your Hydra or your Familiar, but fire damage scales your damage over time, as well as the instant damage of Hydra and the Familiar. Otherwise, on gear, getting just generic stuff is pretty good, like Intelligence, damage over time, damage to close. And if you don't get the pyromancy temper, the natural temper, just getting flat damage percent or damage to close is also good. So feel free to just go for those. But ideally, fire damage is probably what you want. Otherwise, like, get some armor, try to cap your resistances. Mana on kills, like, okay, just go for like intelligence and just like damage over time, straight up damage, sort of stuff like that. That's pretty much it. Sorc Firewall has always been pretty straightforward, and now there's a little bit of extra stuff you can do to kind of make it slightly more powerful. But if you wanted to, you could just be brain dead and just hold down right click with Firewall, press familiars every once in a while, and just put down 2 Hydras. There's also a temper for extra Hydra heads, which you could do on your weapon. I didn't get it while playing, but there is one that'll give you what is it called here? On your weapon, it'll get casted Hydras have extra heads. That's probably pretty decent for overall damage, but it's also fine to just have like firewall related things. That's up to you. There's a seasonal mechanic, which I don't know what it is yet because it's not in the version of the game I'm playing, but I will just update that on the website when I learn what that is. Whatever the seasonal power mechanic is, it's probably a pretty decent damage increase, so I'll just slam it in there. But yeah, build's pretty straightforward. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check me out on Twitch. Subscribe, like the video. Feel free to watch a whole bunch of the other videos that I have posted. And make sure to check out the build link and give it a favorite. That's pretty much it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later. Peace.